What Do I Tell the Kids with Gilda's Club, Kansas City. My name is Clara Anderson Sainte, and I am the program director here. And I'm happy to talk to you today about this topic that we get asked quite a bit, particularly from our community partners in the community who are working alongside patients. And if you're a patient, we'll kind of talk to you about, how to do this in your family as well. So as our overview, we're going to talk about kind of what the kids' understanding is based off their age, kind of talking about it, and tips for answering those hard questions and kind of ways to help your child, as well as the questions and resources that are available to you and available in our city particularly. So obviously we need to talk a little bit about each kid's developmental understanding. It's a great quote about how it all really needs to be factored into each individual kid, even siblings, right? Different ages, different kids react differently to stressful situations. We really have to know the kid we're working with or in our family and know how to adapt this conversation for their needs or maybe limitations, and know that they shouldn't really be forced into acting or behaving or responding in a certain way. So obviously with our littles, there's very little concept around understanding, but they really are able to sense that change in routine. I think a lot of times there's a misconception that they're too young to even get that something's going on, but they really can pick up on that anxiety in the home or kind of those changes. And just are really aware that maybe the adults are stressed or feeling some, maybe someone else is watching them while their parent goes to treatment. And a lot of times that shows up in kids through maybe some tantrums or changes in their eating and sleeping patterns, and kind of start seeing that separation anxiety occur. So in a little bit, preschool age kids, they get a little bit understanding of what a simple illness is, right? Because they might have had a cold or maybe they've had a flu, but really haven't conceptualized larger things like cancer or let alone COVID. And so there's really just this big gap in a knowledge base there. So they create magically what they think it might be. And oftentimes what we see with kids this age is what they're thinking it might be is actually worse than the reality of it. So there's a lot of misconception that maybe we shouldn't say the word cancer because that's too scary and they won't understand. But it's actually very helpful for us to use that terminology, to use the actual words we've been given. Now, not the very lengthy diagnosis that I can't even understand sometimes, but just simple words so they know that there is a difference between maybe a cold and what cancer looks like. So we see this a little bit in this age of regression. So maybe they were sleeping through the night, now they're not, or maybe they were potty trained, now they're not, or having some accidents. There's sudden burst of emotion. I don't know if you can hear my 5 and 2-year-old in the background, but she's currently screaming. So that happens just anytime. So we really have to suss out what the difference is between what the illness impact is in the family and what would be typical kind of tantrums or burst of emotions that we would see in preschool age kids. But really they repetitively ask questions and they need their information in bite size, right? So you might tell them this really heavy news and they don't really respond, but they need to go run and play for a while. And then a few days later, they might come back to it. So there's just really this space between their play world and the ability to chunk out this really heavy emotion. And again, that separation anxiety is only going up. So maybe it's harder for them to stay at grandma and grandpa's or stay with a friend that maybe helps babysit quite a bit. They seem that kind of really be more attached to the parent or who it is that they're experiencing the cancer impact. And they really see this played out in their themes and their play. Maybe with a younger sibling or their dolls, there's lots of going to doctor's visits. There's lots of, oh, do you have a stomach ache? And you kind of see it out in their play. As we get into a little bit school age children, so they really can now conceptualize the difference between a cold and cancer, but there's still a lot of misinformation about that. So this is where we clarify a lot for kids of, no, you can't catch it, it's not contagious. But really a big piece of this age is, no, you didn't cause it. At the end of a kid support program we had a few years ago, about an 8-year-old just broke down crying that she had carried this weight, that she got mad at her mom the day before the mom was diagnosed, and she just assumed that it was her fault. that the mom had then received that cancer diagnosis. And so it's really just making sure we're protecting that space for the kid, that there wasn't anything they did to cause it. And that magical thinking really does occur, and those fears really get going in terms of worrying about the future and if the person might die and how it might look for them in the future. So that's where we really get into supporting the kid a little bit differently at this age. So you see a lot of it still continue. There's a lot now around anger if their routine gets disrupted. So maybe now they have to go stay somewhere else. They have to change up their routine. So they might start distancing themselves from the family unit out of self-protection, which we only see that continue as the kid ages. So in middle school, really basic understanding of cancer, they kind of can conceptualize some of this, but still, we really have to clarify a lot of misinformation because they're still in a stage of magical thinking as well, of kind of creating those worst case scenarios. At this age, they probably have heard of some outcomes of cancer that aren't favorable, that maybe they do know someone who has died from cancer, and so that increases the fear of someone else they know that might. And so we really have to be cognizant of that. But at this age, they're really starting to kind of get closer to that peer group. They're really trying to mask or hide those feelings, very worried. And that fear and sadness gets expressed a lot more in anger, right? It's a safer emotion to express because they don't yet have the words for those bigger, heavier emotions. And just very embarrassed, like my mom doesn't have any hair, my dad is tired all the time, he can't play catch with me anymore. And just kind of that difference of I look a little bit different, my family looks a little bit different than my peer group, and kind of starting to see the impact of that. When we get into the teen age, lots of common behaviors is that independence versus staying close to the family unit. So they're trying to balance being their own person as well as still needing to be a caregiver, to be a part of that family unit. This is where that anger, if they have to miss some of their sporting events due to the illness or the treatment plan, where they're hiding the feelings a lot more, that frustration and anger coming out on the family is a lot more prevalent. And one thing that we always talk about, particularly with the teens, is finding that trusted adult that they can go to kind of unpack some of that emotion. And unfortunately, that person for a teen is usually not the parent. Although the parent really wants to be that space for them, we really talk about, is there a parent of a friend, a teacher, a coach? Who is it in a teen's life that could really hold that emotional space? Because a lot of times the teens don't want to bring it to that family unit because they don't want to add to the already existing emotions that are already there. They want to be strong and be helpful, and really kind of need to unpack some of their emotions outside the family unit. So again, they have basic understanding, although there is some misinformation, but they're thinking a lot more about the life and death and the meaning of it all, and really kind of weighing, mainly this is common, I think, through all of the ages, is who's going to take care of me? If something bad really were to happen, what's the plan? Is there a plan? Has that been thought through? And I think that's the biggest part we can help with, is that reassurance that the kids will be taken care of. So really important is really our ability to have this direct conversation and not leave it up to their imagination, because oftentimes they think worst case scenario beyond what we've been told and beyond the treatment options that have been given to us. So we need to be very clear about what has been presented, again, using the term cancer, using what knowledge we do have. And it's okay to be like, we're not entirely sure, but we're hoping for the best. This is the plan we have at this time. I will always update you as there's changes, and you're always allowed to ask me questions. So just really opening the floor for this continued conversation. So again, we really need to prepare ourselves before going into this conversation, make sure that we're balanced, we're not hungry, we're not overtired, that we are our balanced self so that we can best hold the space for the kids. Really need to also time that conversation for them. Are they tired? Are they really hungry? Are they super distracted by, video games or whatever else is happening in the home? How do we really create that space to have that heavier conversation. And it, again, it's very useful what language we're using. So how do we even provide that physical presence when it's harder to use the words? Are we still hugging and providing that physical touch with our kids, and really just keeping it to key points? Very little, kids can't hold conversation longer than 5 minutes. Teens probably can't hold it much longer than that, even, because it's just so much to take in. So it's okay to kind of chunk it out, but make sure we're leaving that option for the open communication for it to return. And we just had this survey done that most kids didn't always feel like it was okay for them to share their feelings about cancer. So that's where you get into, kid support at Gilda's Club, or finding kids who have other friends whose families are going through this. So they really have that bond that's already comfortable to ask those harder questions to some other kid who's gone through it. So a lot of the common questions and tips for answering that we get, what is cancer? Again, really giving basic information. Don't need to give the very long, detailed diagnosis, but, very basic. But very commonly misconception is, can I catch it? But then what are the different treatment options? Chemotherapy, radiation, surgery, and now there's even more, in terms of immunotherapy, clinical trials. How do we really break down some of those conversations? Why are you losing your hair? What is it in the chemo that's causing this? Does it grow back? And sometimes people take chemotherapy and they don't lose their hair. So, that we're working with the doctors and the providers to get the information about the side effects that we might happen. We had a kid ask once, how do you know it's not the flu? He's sick for a few days and then he gets better, which really helped give us an understanding of where that kid was, because that makes sense to me too, right? The flu, you throw up for a few days and then you're better. So how do you suss out the difference between the flu and cancer? But I think this is very common for most kids. They, really want to know, do people with cancer die? And I think this is probably the hardest space for parents and for providers to get into this conversation. It makes us a little anxious and uncomfortable, because inevitably there will be asked, are you going to die? And so we have to have that conversation around, this is what we think my treatment options are. We're doing everything we can so that I can get better. And if the worst were to happen, this is where our plan would be. This is how you would be taken care of. And let's keep talking about this. And also, I think the biggest point to hit home is that it's okay for kids to talk outside the family system, again, to their trusted friend, their teacher, that parent of a friend, somewhere where they can ask more questions. But then those people need to know kind of what has already been told to the kid. What do they already know? What is the family comfortable with, the rest of kind of their circle knowing about the information? So it's always good to kind of have that community care in place, where it's everybody's kind of looking out for the best interest of the family. So additional ways, again, always keeping that open communication, but really even showing our own feelings and validating that, it's okay to feel scared, to feel sad, to feel anger, that all of that is incredibly appropriate. And it's okay to have fun still. It's okay to still laugh. It's okay to find lightness in our day, just as we did before. And that's really important, that there's still that space for kids to be kids and to really be able to keep that normalcy as much as we can. And really maintain the routine, and to still stick to rules and discipline. My kid is 5, so the SAS level is at an ultimate high, and that would still be carried through. That there are still, ways that we can react to the situation that we would have normally, and that we can continue that even when maybe we're really tired, just because I really like to know kind of what the boundaries are in the family, and allow the kids to help out when they can. Obviously, connecting with school is a little bit challenging given the state we're in now, but that generally is something available to kiddos. Also, when to seek outside support, maybe with Gilda's Club or with other mental health professionals, when we see those extreme changes in behavior. So maybe not one accident if they were previously potty trained, but now it's frequent and it's occurring quite regularly, or we see that isolation. Maybe they're no longer wanting to hang out with any friends. Maybe they're now really struggling in school, or they don't want to do their after school activities, their favorite sports. And obviously, if it gets to the desire to hurt themselves or someone else, we definitely need some intervention. So there is a book available to you for free. You can always contact Gilda's Club Kansas City. We could get you a copy, or there is a link to the PDF that walks through pretty much what we've talked about today to just kind of reiterate, and it's kind of has illustrations by kids, so you can walk through it with your children. There's also a quick guide on our Cancer Support Community Headquarters website. And there's also a radio show kind of really talking about, my parent has cancer and it really sucks. And so there's some resources available to you online. There's also Camp Kesem, which is a week-long camp. I'm not quite sure the plan for that this summer, but I'm sure the website has that, and lots of different websites that could help. Rethink Breast Cancer is actually out of Canada. I did include the YouTube link at the bottom. They have some really good geared towards, school-age kiddos on explaining cancer and explaining the operation, what chemotherapy is. It is dedicated to breast cancer, but I think is good actually for all types of cancer. And just additional support options here at Gilda's Club. We offer a Families Connect on the 4th Thursday of every month. Right now, that's via Zoom from 5 to 6:30. And that's for parents who are living with cancer or have a cancer impact in their family. So normally speaking, in our clubhouse days, when we were all in our normal programming, the kids would meet in their own, in our Noogie Land, in our kids area, and the parents meet separately for their own group. And Kid Support, which normally runs on Thursdays, June through August, is set up that exact same way. Each week has a curriculum, and the kids understand what feelings are, what is cancer, really some mindfulness that will help them through, but really build that sense of community as they meet with other kids who've already gone through this experience. And same thing, parents meet at the same time. We host a family meal at the end of it. And then there's kind of like a graduation at the end of it. Stay tuned. We're not quite sure how that will look this summer, given COVID and some of the restrictions. So we're trying to adapt that to the needs of our families. But I just also wanted to let you know about Open to Options. If you're up to a treatment decision and need some help kind of preparing for your next doctor's appointment, this is a great tool where we will help you create a question list that will go over your understanding of a situation, your quality of life goals, and all those questions for your providers. And again, I wanted to invite you. We have moved National Cancer Survivors Day, which is generally the first Sunday in June, to October 11th, hoping to still gather at the Block Cancer Park in Kansas City, so we can host really a celebration for everyone to provide more cancer education and connect the community to local resources. And at this point, we will stop the recording and turn it over for questions. Thank you.